Welcome back to the channel, everybody, and I know I've been teasing doing a face cam for a couple of days now, and regardless of the results of the stuff that was going to happen, I was going to do it regardless, but we're here going to do like a little test run, a little trial run on it, and, you know, I promised some draft content for you guys, and while I'm not going to be doing a mock draft like each and every single week like a lot of people are, because I do think that gets a little bit repetitive, I do want to do a mock draft kind of right at the end of the season. I know the Super Bowl hasn't happened yet, but you know, the draft order basically set, give or take, 31-32, and everything's kind of locked in right now, and it's pre-combine, pre-senior bowl, pre-everything else, and I want to just kind of go in before I scout all the prospects a little bit more in-depth, and just do a fun little trial run on the mock draft, trial run on the face cam as well, and we will start things off with the Tennessee Titans at number 1. So you can let me know how everything sounds, everything looks, everything is good. I'm like I said, this is also a bit of a trial run for me, but Titans at number 1. So with the Titans at 1, there's already a lot of discussion about what's going to happen here, and a lot of the number 1 overall picks are pretty clear cut. I mean, you can even just go back to last year. It wasn't just Caleb. We kind of knew what the top 5 was going to be like. We knew Caleb 1, and some combination of Jaden and Drake May 2 and 3. We knew Marv at 4. We knew either Neighbors or Joe Alt, but most likely Joe Alt at 5. This year, though, I do feel like it's super wide open what really any of the teams in the top 5 can do. Now, I think doing trades is going to complicate things, and there also is like a mix between, you know, what I would do and what they are going to do. I'm going to predict what they are going to do and then maybe drop in if I have a strong opinion of what they should do. Now, for the Tennessee Titans, this team is really bad. Like, this is a team that is not a quarterback away, or, you know, you get the right QB coach combination, you can go far. This is not a team that can turn around pretty quickly because they just lack high-end talent. Unless they get crazy breakouts, or unless they get, you know, crazy draft class, a crazy free agency class, this team isn't a team where you could just plug in a quarterback right now and everything's gonna be okay. I think we're at the point where Will Levis probably isn't the guy, though I don't think it'd be the craziest thing to just trot out Will Levis for another year, just because throwing a quarterback onto this team at its current state might be setting it up for failure. I mean, even if you're taking a quarterback, maybe sit them. I'm very much a proponent of, like, hey, if you draft a quarterback, play him. But there are instances where a team in a situation is so bad to where just sit the guy and don't ruin him before he gets a real chance to do much of anything. So for the Tennessee Titans, if I were the Titans, if I had to sit there and pick at 1, I am still going to take Cam Ward. But if I could trade down to, you know, say 2, 3, 4, you know, say the Browns or the Giants, like, really want to just lock in to get, like, Shador or something, or the Patriots really want to go and get, like, Travis Hunter or something, I wouldn't be opposed to trading down, getting a haul, just stacking up a roster and getting just picks, getting players, because the Titans are one of those teams, they just need players. They just need guys. How many great players are on the Titans right now? Not many. How many high-level players, not even just great players? They just don't have talent. And they need just... I feel like you can make an argument that, like, any position feasibly could be upgraded this offseason. Nothing is locked in aside from Jeffrey Simmons. So, if I was the Titans, I'd see what the trade-down options are, but, you know, trading is not going to be what we do in this, so I'm just going to say, if they stand here, pick number 1, there's only one quarterback in this class that I actually will bet on to be a good quarterback. I'm not a Shador fan. Milroe has his ups and downs, and he could be good, but definitely not someone you're taking this high. So the only quarterback I'd actually bet on to be good, and I do really like him, is Cam Ward. So they said they're not going to pass on, like, a generational player at the number 1 pick. Well, there's only 2 generational players in this class, and I say only 2. 2 is a lot for a class. 2 generational players is pretty crazy, but they're not taking Janty at 1. That doesn't really make sense. So it comes down to Travis Hunter if they want to take just the straight-up best player, or go to Cam Ward, and I don't know if you're really saying Cam Ward is generational, but Cam Ward is the pick, and I don't know how I feel if Cam Ward and Callahan is the coach quarterback combination that can supersede a lot of roster deficiencies. You know, I'm not sold on Callahan being the guy, but I guess not sold. Like, he still has a lot to prove, but I'm not a Callahan believer, just not a, you know, I'm not out on him yet. So I would feel kind of bad for a quarterback to go into this situation, but it'll be Cam Ward at number 1. And then you get to number 2 for the Browns, and my goodness, you want to talk about a bad situation to be in, because now, say Cam Ward goes number 1, you need a quarterback, and you are paying Watson an unbelievable amount to do nothing. Basically do nothing, and there's every chance, unfortunately, that the Browns are just going to trot him out to be the starter next year, and I don't even think that'd be a crazy, reality that somehow, some way Deshaun Watson would be the starter again, because you just have so much invested in him. He shouldn't be the starter. What the heck else are you going to do? You reach on a quarterback here? What do you do? The team is old and aging. Myles Garrett doesn't want to go through a rebuild. The offensive line, which was one of the best in the league, is regressing. Nick Chubb is just not the same. The team is just slowly getting worse and worse, older and older. Their window to have that Super Bowl caliber defense and have the quarterback to take them there, it's closed now. They thought Deshaun Watson would be that guy. He's not that guy, obviously, and you can't get out of that contract this year without taking a big hit. So what do you do in this situation? Well, this is again before any moves are made. I wouldn't be shocked if Myles Garrett's on the move this season. I don't think taking a quarterback's, again, this is setting them up for failure, and at the very least, I like Cam Ward, and I think Cam Ward, I'm betting on Cam Ward to be a good quarterback. Well, he's off the board here. Are you betting on Shedeur to be a good quarterback? No, I don't think so. I think Shedeur does have a limited ceiling. I think at this point, again, if the Giants want to go up and get Shedeur, or someone wants to go up like the Raiders and get him, you trade down. But if you're sitting here, I think this is a spot where you could just take Hunter or Carter. If I had to say, I think Abdul Carter, in the sense that if they move on from Garrett, they're going to want to fill that hole. They're going to want to do something here. And I don't know what the trade value of a Myles Garrett's going to be at this point, because it's not like the Browns have a lot of leverage on him. Obviously, you look at Myles Garrett, it's like, oh yeah, obviously he should get traded for a lot, but it doesn't always work like that if you don't have leverage. If he doesn't want to be there and you can't really do much to really move him or get him to play or whatever the case is, you don't got leverage, and either he doesn't want to play for you or he plays at half effort in a rebuilding stage. You got to get what you can for him. So I think they could get a late first round pick for him, but I think they're going to want to get Abdul Carter to replace some of what Myles Garrett gave them. Obviously, optimistically, even at his absolute best, maybe he could be 95% of Myles Garrett, but that's obviously unrealistic to predict. But Abdul Carter is the number 1 edge in this class and has the highest ceiling to potentially be a great game-changing type of number 1 true edge rusher, 10 sack a year, a lot of pressures, true number 1 talent upside type of player. This puts the Giants at 3. They need a quarterback. How many times can they just go through and just not get a quarterback? And I know a lot of people wanted to dunk on them for oh, they wanted to trade up for Jaden or Drake May. Yeah, they wanted to, but Washington and New England, they didn't want to trade down. The Giants could have offered them, a couple of first round picks. You can't dunk on the Giants, though. They weren't willing to trade down with these teams, and the Giants, try as they may, they weren't getting a quarterback. The Giants and the Raiders have been the 2 teams in the boat of, they've been trying to get quarterbacks, they just can't. Last year was such a great class that who's trading down? Who's willingly throwing away Jaden Daniels or throwing away Drake May? They're not doing that. And especially with this quarterback class, because whereas last year's quarterback classes, could go down as an all-timer, this one, not really. So I think the Giants are going to be too desperate. They need a quarterback. They've been just on the outside looking in. And while if I were the Giants, I'm not a Shedeur guy. I'm not sold on Shedeur. So for me, I would sit there and say just take Travis Hunter and just don't even... You can't go wrong taking a generational talent, but the need for quarterback is just so vast that they're just going to take Shedeur just because they're not running out DeVito, Daniel Jones, or Drew Lock. Don't think they're signing Sam Darnold. I don't know where Sam Darnold's going this offseason, but I don't think he's going back to New York. I know it's different team, but I don't think he wants to deal with New York again. So the Giants, I think, will be going with Shedeur, which puts us at the Patriots, and this is a dream scenario for the Patriots. If you get Travis Hunter at 4, this is, what I would do is I take Travis Hunter. What they should do, should take Travis Hunter. What they are going to do, if Travis Hunter is here at 4, this is a dream scenario for the Patriots to say, hey, quarterbacks are going ahead of us. We got our guy. We got Drake May. We just need to surround him with talent. And I know that the need for offensive line is strong, but I'm not taking any of these offensive linemen at 4, especially when there is going to be a discussion with guys like Hunter and Janty. Do you want to take an offensive lineman that you like, or take a player that you like, or take a player that you love and that you know is going to be good? There are not many players in a draft class where you could say, yeah, I know that's going to be a great player. Travis Hunter, I mean, he's got 2 chances. He could be a great receiver or a great corner. Pairing him with Christian Gonzalez, an all-pro corner, is going to be fun. Throwing him on offense with Drake May is going to be fun. You have to take Travis Hunter if that opportunity presents itself. Jaguars at 5. I think this one's pretty clear-cut for the Jaguars. They have among the worst interior defensive lines in the entire league, and I know they have Armstead, but Armstead's obviously not a long-term piece. This is pretty clear-cut to me that gotta go Mason Graham. I think that there are other options here. Like, you could go Will Johnson to pair with Tyson Campbell. I mean, you could just go nuclear and go Brian Thomas and Tet. As much as I love Janty just about anywhere, I don't think you go Janty here when you have ETN, and Tank Bigsby was surprisingly good this year. Offensive line, you do need offensive line, but Mason Graham, a pretty sure thing in this class to be at least a very nice player, and I think he has, like Pro Bowl, all pro level upside to him, and he's just someone that they need. You already got your edge duo in Josh Allen and Trayvon Walker. You go and put Mason Graham on the defensive line. You keep Eric Armstead for another year maybe, and he can give you some good play. That instantly becomes a very nice D-line if you can get some rotational pieces, and it can turn what was a weakness for this Jaguars team in the interior into a strength. So now the Raiders, it's poor Raiders in a sense, because they tried to trade up last year for a quarterback. Did not work. They could not get that. Now, with how the board is shaken out, how everything has gone, this very likely could be the Sam Darnold team. So, Sam Darnold's going to go somewhere, and I think after how the season ended, the Vikings have no real need to keep Darnold. Just, like, Darnold has limited play. He played by far his best season, but I don't think you're going far with Darnold, and at that point, don't lock yourself into QB purgatory. See what you have in JJ McCarthy. I think McCarthy can be as good as Darnold, but I think at least gives you the idea that he could be better than Darnold. So this is definitely where, with how the board's shaking out, where I predict Darnold to go, and maybe that doesn't excite Raiders fans. I don't know if you're really going crazy for Sam Darnold, but he's got to go somewhere. Someone's going to pay him, and if Ward and Sanders are the picks up here, because the Titans already know what they're doing. If they're picking a quarterback, they're obviously not going to be looking at Darnold. The Giants, if they have something in line, they're not going to be looking at Darnold. So it'd be down to like the Raiders. Maybe you could say the Saints, but they're just probably going to keep Derek Carr. And then there's just not many other teams here that would really go for that. I don't know if the Colts would replace Anthony Richardson with Darnold. It'd be pretty lackluster, Even if Aaron Rodgers is retiring, Darnold's not going back to the Jets. So this makes sense to where this could be the Darnold spot, which, if that's the case, well, you look at what you need here, and it's Pete Carroll. Pete Carroll's the coach. Well, what is Pete Carroll, good for? He's good at running the ball, and he has this, tough identity of a team. Who did he have ride to a Super Bowl? He had Marshawn Lynch. Well, who reminds you a lot of Marshawn Lynch with the amount of tackles that he breaks, the amount of physicality that he brings? If you have Sam Darnold on the team and, the quarterbacks are off the board, at that point, you're taking maybe Will Johnson. You could go Will Johnson. You need a corner. You could go Tet. You do need a receiver. But for Pete Carroll, if you are telling me what he'd prioritize receiver last. I think he'd prioritize corner second, but only because if the two were level, I think he'd take, Will Johnson over Janty if Will Johnson were as good as Janty, but Janty's a generational player, and, in my opinion, at worst, like, the third best running back in my lifetime. I was alive for Adrian Peterson, obviously, but not old enough to really know how great of a prospect he is. When I look at the three best prospects that I've gotten to look at running back, I think Saquon Barkley, I think Bijan Robinson, I think Ashton Jeanty. And for me, Ashton Jeanty is, I think, better than both of them as a prospect. And I've been on the Jeanty hype train before a lot of people, before a lot of the season, madness ensued. Going into the year, Jeanty was my number one running back going into the year, before he had, what could have been a Heisman winning season, before he almost broke all the records and everything. Jeanty was my number one running back. I had him ahead of Judkins, ahead of Hampton, ahead of Ollie Gordon, who was getting a lot of hype going into the year. I had him ahead of all those guys pretty clear cut, because Jeanty, I just knew was special. Like, he is so incredible. So, again, do you take a player you like, or do you take a player you love and that you know will be good? And I think Jeanty goes at 6, especially with the rise of running backs being, kind of a renaissance for them with Saquon and Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry. And I think you're going to be looking at Jeanty going maybe higher than what some people would be wanting to spend on a running back. There's still some people who just will sit there and say, oh, running back doesn't matter. No, running back matters. Maybe you don't need a Jeanty, maybe you don't need a Saquon, but it matters, and it definitely helps when you do have one, especially when you don't have a great quarterback. If you have Darnold, if you have whoever else may be your quarterback, if you want to rock Aiden O'Connell or Justin Fields or Russell Wilson, maybe Russell Wilson will go back with Pete Carroll. I don't know, but whoever you may be rocking at quarterback, he's not a superstar type of player, and Jeanty's going to make that job a lot easier for him. You go to the Jets at 7, and what a mess this team is. Oh, man. So, going off the implication that Rodgers is gone, and in turn that would mean Devontae Adams is gone, I think it's pretty likely to say someone like DJ Reed's probably gone. I don't think they're going to pay DJ Reed. You got a lot of options here. I mean, Garrett Wilson seems unhappy. Are they going to move on from Garrett Wilson? I think it'd be rough to move on from Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams in one season. So I don't think Tet is off the board here, or off the, off the list here, off the draft board to potentially take here at 7. But I don't think that'll happen. I think you'd be looking, a little best player available situation, and for a guy like Aaron Glenn taking over as coach, I think he'll go and say, you know what, we're moving on from DJ Reed because he's like 30 years old. He's an undersized 30-year-old corner who I don't think is going to age gracefully, in the next couple of years. I think someone end up paying DJ Reed like 20 plus million could have some regret if it's like a 4-year type of deal, because I don't think a undersized older corner is going to age gracefully. But you got Sauce Gardner, pair him with Will Johnson, and you can have a duo maybe even better than what Sauce and Reed was, 2 years ago or a year ago when Robert Saleh was calling the defense and they were a top 5 defense in the league. Going back to dream scenarios here, I think the Panthers, this is a pretty dream scenario for them, because you watched all these teams go and snag players that you don't really need, because you don't need a quarterback. After what Bryce Young showed you last year, at the end of the season, you're good. Running back, I mean, I know the Jonathan Brooks stuff is rough, but Chuba Hubbard was awesome. Yeah, maybe you could have used the corner, but, J.C. Horn's pretty good, obviously. Maybe you could have used an interior D lineman to pair with Derek Brown, but you don't need it. Travis Hunter, unrealistic for him to be at 8. Well, what do you need to give Bryce Young a true number 1 receiver? I know you took Xavier Legette last year, but Legette was not a guy I viewed as a true number 1 type of upside guy. There are some receivers that even if they go in the first round, you don't take a receiver in the first round always expecting them to be a true number 1 just because they go in the first round. I mean, a guy, for example, that I loved a couple of years ago, Jordan Addison, was a guy who I didn't really see number 1 in him. I seen, man, Addison could be a great number 2. He was my number 1 receiver in that year's class, and I thought, like, yeah, for what Jordan Addison has been in his first 2 seasons, you spend a first-round pick on that every time. But he's not a true number 1 receiver. Obviously, getting to play with Justin Jefferson helps him a lot, but there are some guys that even if you take them in the first round, you don't anticipate true number 1 receiver stuff from them. Tet, that's true number 1 receiver stuff. Tet and both him and Luther Burden, I think, are true number 1 type of players. So you get Tet, you put him with Legette, you put him with all the other guys. If you keep Thielen, you got Jalen Coker, you got a couple of other guys, Tavion Sanders I like. you give Bryce a true number one, it kind of bumps down the order a little bit, and it doesn't force guys into roles that they shouldn't be. Because as much as I like Leggett, he's not a number one. He probably never will be a number one. You can't force him to be that. And, Tet is just a monster. So get Bryce a true number one receiver and really invest in what Bryce can be. And for a guy also in Dave Canales, who came from Tampa Bay. Well, who do you have in Tampa Bay that was, big, good, long speed, true number one ball winner? Mike Evans. Well, I think there's some Mike Evans here in Tet. So I think this is a match made in heaven type of pick here for Dave Canales and the Panthers. As of this recording, the Saints still don't have a head coach. Maybe by the time this goes up or whatever the case is, the Saints will have a head coach, but I don't even know what they're looking for at this point because this team's in just cap nightmare. They are stuck with Derek Carr, which no one ever wants to be stuck with Derek Carr at quarterback. There's no real clear, better options for them to get, not just in this draft, but really in free agency. I don't think you're sitting there saying Sam Darnold is going to be worth paying, and having Derek Carr just sitting around there. I mean, at that point, just keep Derek Carr, ride things out, and hope that the quarterback class next year is a little bit better. Spencer Rattler's not the option, not the answer. Alvin Kamara is getting older, and Ryan Ramczyk's probably going to be gone, and it's just brutal, man, because you got Tyrann Mathieu, and even though Demario Davis just doesn't seem to get bad in old age, he's eventually going to have to leave and retire. You traded Lattimore. This team is depleted, has no money, not a lot of talent, and you could go so many options here. I think you could just say, just take the best player. And if you're taking the best player, it's Malachi Starks. Malachi Starks would be the best player on the board. Do you take a safety at 9 when you have all the needs that you have? I don't think so. They did go lineman in the first round last year, but Trevor Penning has not been good. And like I said, Ramczyk is gone, basically. He's probably going to retire. So you took a lineman last year, but that doesn't mean you don't need another tackle or another guard or another player to go out there on the line. Receiver, maybe, but no, I don't think so. Olave is one of the few good players you have. I don't think you need to add to that. You could go strength on strength there and add burden, but I don't think that would be a good idea. So, a lot of places you could go, but I'll play it pretty safe here and go with Campbell and just say, the Trevor Penning experience, it's just let it go. It's not going to work. He played better, but he's still not a great player overall, and it's not been a good first-round pick. And considering you traded basically Jalen Carter to get that pick, I know you got some sunk cost fallacy there, but just give it up, man. Now, the Bears at 10, I think there is very much a world where if Janty doesn't go 6, I think he would just go to the Bears. Janty is a popular pick for the Cowboys. I don't think he's making it to the Cowboys at this point because you got Pete Carroll and you got Ben Johnson here waiting to go and take a generational running back. So I think the Cowboys would have to trade up to get him. But no Janty on the board. I don't think you're taking another running back at 10, though I am interested where the league is going to end up resting on some of these running backs because this is one of the best running back classes in recent memory, not just because of Janty, but because there's just so many great players you could go. Amari and Hampton, Caleb Johnson, you can go with Judkins, Travion Henderson. I don't think he's going to be a first rounder, but there's just so many players that you could just fall in love with at running back. So it makes me wonder, will the great players at the running back position eventually just naturally rise up the board? Or will the team say, well, there's just so many good ones, we don't need to take one now. As long as we just get a good one in round 2, we're fine. So none of them all end up going in the first round other than Janty. I think it can go either way, but all it takes is one team to fall in love with a running back. I just don't think it'd be at 10. So for the Bears, that puts them in a spot where edge rusher is probably what they're looking at because they need someone to put opposite Sweat. I mean, other than Montez Sweat, it's been not good anywhere. Like, they don't have starting caliber edge rushers outside of Montez Sweat. You could go, like, Mike Green's a big riser, and Mike Green is just a designated pass rush specialist, and I do think that there is a world where you say, hey, Montez Sweat's one of the better run-stopping edges in the league and is a good pass rusher, and you pair him with Mike Green just flying off the edge, it wouldn't be a bad combo. I do think it'd actually be a pretty good spot for him to go in terms of a duo with him and Montez Sweat, and he doesn't have to be the true number one. Because I think if you're drafting Mike Green to be your true out and out number one, I think you're misunderstanding what Mike Green is, because he's not an every down type of, throw him on the field, be a top level edge rusher, stop the run, be a 10 sack guy. He could be a 10 sack guy, but he's not a guy who's going to be playing every down. So if you're drafting him to be your number one, I think that's where teams may go wrong. So James Pierce, you could go there. I do like, a guy in Nick Scorton a lot. Shamar Stewart, with his talent and his upside, has been getting a lot of draft hype. And again, this is going back to what I think they're going to do, not what I would do. What I would do, I mean, I'm a big trade down type of guy. I know I've said trade down a couple of times, but for me, if Janty was off the board and I didn't have a shot at him, I'd just say maybe trade down. I don't know if they will have that option. You could, again, Malachi Stark's just sitting there, just take the best player, maybe. But Mike Green's getting so much hype, so much excitement for Mike Green, and I will at least say putting him with Montez Sweat is at least a fun duo. And like I said, all it takes is one player or one team to fall in love with a player, and this could be the team that falls in love with him. So I think 10 is rich for Mike Green. I don't think I would personally take Mike Green at 10, even though I do like him. I think the Bears would sit there and say, we're not in love with any of the offensive linemen here, even though we do need an offensive lineman, and we need an edge rusher, so let's just go and get somebody who can attack the other quarterback in Mike Green. For the 49ers, this one feels pretty clear-cut to me. I mean, they need offensive line. They need a lot of help on the offensive line, and I know this team got wrecked by injuries, so being a team as talented as the Niners with Kyle Shanahan at coach and getting the 11th pick is going to be pretty exciting to see how he handles that, and having, actually pretty good draft capital this time around. But the offensive line need is just so strong, and you got a guy like Kelvin Banks on the board. He has flexibility. I mean, maybe you could try him out at tackle. Very likely could be a guard at the next level. You got Trent Williams still for now, and I think it's pretty clear-cut that the Niners will probably go offensive line. It's just a matter of where they go, and I'll have them go Kelvin Banks here. For the Cowboys, this is less than ideal for them to not have a chance at JNT, because that's the popular pick for the Cowboys. Everyone just has them going JNT. I just don't think he'll be there for 12. And receiver is a need. I do feel like, though, this team just feels like they're going to just get Stephon Diggs. Like, I don't have, like, any sources or anything, and I know there's been some noise about it, but it just feels like such a Stephon Diggs team. Let's bring in the big name, and his brother's here, and, he could be a number 2 receiver, and let's buy low on him. Now, I'm obviously not going to operate under the assumption that that's going to happen. If you want to take a wide receiver here, Luther Burden's the best receiver on the board, pretty clear-cut. I think there's a lot of people sleeping on Luther Burden. I will say right now, for people trying to sleep on Luther Burden and, say, oh, he had a worse season this past year or anything, buy all of the Luther Burden stocks, because he is really not that far off of Ted. He really isn't. Ted is amazing. But, like, Luther Burden, for me, I would have had him as wide receiver 3 last year. Like, dead serious. I love Luther Burden so much. I would have had him over... I like him more than I liked Rome as a prospect. I would have had him, I would have had Marv 1, I would have had Neighbors 2, I would have had Burden 3 if he was last year. So, I love him. The problem is very conflicting roles with CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb's a true number 1, funnel your offense to screens and get him the ball in space. Just get him the ball by any means necessary. Burden's also that type of player. You can have 2 players like that, but you would more so be looking for a complementary piece, which is why I think they would steer clear of Burden, even though he's, to me, the clear-cut best receiver on the board at this point. I don't really think anyone else, Ibuka or Golden or anyone else here is really on Burden's level. I think they're pretty comfortable with Ferguson, so I don't think they're going Warren or Loveland. The Mozzie Smith pick hasn't worked out, so maybe you say Kenneth Grant. DeMarcus Lawrence is going to be probably on his way out, so maybe you say edge, but I do really like Marshawn Nealon. I thought that was a really good pick, and I wouldn't mind them going and just giving Marshawn Nealon the starting job at the number 2 edge rusher spot and, rotating him in, maybe get a veteran there, have him and Nealon split snaps. So I don't think they need to go edge here. And for the Cowboys, really could just be a best player available type situation. Don't think they'd go tackle 2 years in a row. They took Guyton last year, and they do need another tackle. Terrence Steele is awful, but I don't know if they spend that here. There's a lot of instances where it's like, man, they could use this, but I don't think the board has shaken out to where they are going to like what's available. Burden, they could use a number 2 receiver, but I don't think Burden's what they're looking for. Maybe they take Ibuka, but I don't think Ibuka's a player I'm taking at 12, me personally. So this goes back to what I would do versus what I think they do. Do I think they take Ibuka? Maybe. Ben Morrison, a little too risky due to the injuries. Edge, don't know if they're going to love them. It kind of puts me at best player available. That goes to Malachi Starks. You got Malik Hooker back there at safety. Donovan Wilson had a nice season, but Malachi Starks is, I think, one of only maybe a few players left on the board that are true game changers, and to have a player at each level of the defense, like a Malachi Starks, a Micah Parsons, I think that's just going to be too enticing to pass up, and somebody's going to have Starks fall into their laps at a very favorable pick because teams just don't value safeties as much as they maybe should, and Malachi Starks is a great safety, so I think maybe it's not the most exciting pick, maybe it's not the running back or the receiver, but Malachi Starks is one of the 10 best players in this class pretty obviously, and you could say maybe one of the 5 best players in this class pretty clear cut, and to get him at 12 I think is going to be something that you should be excited about. So the Dolphins up next. I do wonder, how long will it be before the Dolphins just actually take offensive line seriously? This is a team that just does not care, and they have minimized the impact of what an offensive line can do for your team because they get the ball out so quickly. But that doesn't mean you just don't need offensive linemen. And you can see, the needs here, they say guard, tackle. I think they do need interior D linemen. Safety, if Malachi Starks was on the board, I don't think this would be a crazy pick because I see a world in which Javon Holland's going to be gone. I think Javon Holland, not a lot of people are talking about him hitting the market or being a free agent, but I do think that we could be in a scenario where Javon Holland isn't going to be sticking around and is going to be one of the top guys on the market to command close to $20 million. I don't know if the Dolphins would be wanting to pay that. So if Malachi Starks was on the board, I think he'd be in play for this team. But since he's not, you look at offensive line and you got some options. I think you go Josh Simmons because of the fact that Armstead isn't long for this league anymore, and you got Patrick Paul to maybe be your next in line, but I don't know if you're betting on that. So again, what they would do, I think they're going to finally just take the offensive line a little bit more seriously. The Colts at 14 is a pretty common one that I see when it comes to consensus. Now, I haven't been looking at consensus boards too much, but every single person says, yeah, the Colts are taking Tyler Warren, and I can't really disagree with that one because with how the board shakes out, yeah, it makes sense. You took Latu last year. Don't think you're going edge. Could go maybe Burden. I don't think they need receiver that badly. Josh Downs was awesome this past year. Michael Pittman was disappointing, but you still invested a lot in Michael Pittman, so you're going to be rocking him. Mitchell, I'd like to think he can get a little bit better hit after his rocky first year, and Alec Pierce was a pretty fun deep threat, but I think to really complete this offense in terms of getting a pass catcher, Tyler Warren just opens up so much for this team, and I think it would just be so much fun to have. I hope they roll with Anthony Richardson. I hope they just let him have a full year, invest in him, let him actually get better. And I don't think your options at quarterback, in free agency or the draft are really going to do a whole lot to dissuade you from staying with Anthony Richardson. But I think adding Tyler Warren to this team is going to help out a lot. To me, the 15th pick is also pretty clear-cut as well. The Falcons, I think the Falcons have been on a decade-long search for a good edge rusher. When's the last time you can remember the Falcons having a consistently good edge rusher? They had that 1 year of Vic Beasley, but Judon was not great last year. I can't really think of the last time the Falcons have had a consistently good edge rusher. Like John Abraham? Like, how long has it been? This Falcons team just can't get edge rusher right. And the issue, I think, is they just keep taking like second round edge rushers who are, you know, maybe they can be good, a little bit more projects. They have some okay players. They've had some nice players, but they've never had a true sustained 10 sack number one edge. And they just need to just invest in one in the first round. I think they're going to go with James Pierce. James Pierce, I think, would be the guy they go with at 15, and I do think that would probably be the right pick. I think the Cardinals are in a pretty unique spot. I like a lot of the talent that they have on the team, and a lot of people are down on Marvin Harrison, which is, I feel like, crazy. Marvin Harrison had, what, like 800 yards and he had 8 touchdowns or something? Like people are acting like he's a bust because he didn't put up Brian Thomas or Malik Neighbors' numbers. He's still really good, and he's still, had a nice rookie season. So I don't think there was a need to hit the panic button or hit, like, give up and throw everything at receiver. But I do think the idea of Marvin Harrison and Luther Burden in the same receiving core would be unbelievably terrifying. And if I were running the Cardinals, I would find it hard to pass that up, especially because, to me, I think Luther Burden's just so incredible. Him falling to 16 to me would be like a bit of a crime because he's so good. Like, I mean, for me, I'm not even batting an eye if I needed a receiver to take Luther Burden 10. I do think the board has kind of shaken out in a way where, Saints could, but I don't know if they would. Bears don't need a receiver, especially since they just took Rome Odunze and have DJ Moore. The Niners, maybe. It'd be kind of fun, but no. I think there's conflicting skill sets here. Dolphins, maybe if they trade Tyreek, maybe. Colts, maybe, but I think they go Tyler Warren, and then Falcons, no. So, Burton could very well still be falling. Now, do you go first-round receiver back-to-back years? Maybe not. I think that'd be a little irresponsible with some of the needs that you have, but I do think you can make the argument, let's go best player available, and to me, Luther Burden's the best player on the board right now, but I think this is a team that could go Kenneth Grant here. Now, I wasn't a big fan of the Darius Robinson pick last season. I do think Darius Robinson was a guy who I didn't have a first-round grade on. I thought that was a bit of a reach, and they do need interior D-line help, and I do think if you're looking at the interior defensive line, the best player you could probably pick up right now is Kenneth Grant. I do like Walter Nolan a lot, and, we'll definitely be having him go in the first round, but I think for this team, you very well could be seeing them go Kenneth Grant. Oh, the Bengals at 17. How I am just so tired of that organization, man. I feel bad for some Bengals fans, man. Like, I feel bad for Burrow. I feel bad for Chase. I feel bad for a lot of just things relating to the Bengals, because this team has let so much defensive talent walk out the door and then basically scapegoated Lou Anarumo. Lou Anarumo did not deserve to get fired, and the fact that Lou Anarumo gets to get fired and then Zach Taylor gets to keep his job. Zach Taylor, to me, I know some people will be like, oh, we took him to a Super Bowl and this and this and this, and he wins this many games or whatever. Zach Taylor's not a good head coach. Lou Anarumo is a good defensive coordinator. It's hard to be a good defensive coordinator when you let Jesse Bates walk out the door and you let player after player walk out the door and you've given him only Trey Hendrickson. And, well, Trey Hendrickson, didn't he lead the league in sacks this year? I mean, how many years are they going to ruck Sam Hubbard as a starting edge rusher? Sam Hubbard has not been a starting caliber player for a while now as a guy who should be a true number 2 edge rusher, and they still trot him out every single season. You got a secondary, you let Chidobe Awuzie go, who Awuzie is an amazing player, but, like, how are you going to have a secondary full of, like, 24-year-olds? You need to have some sort of veteran player there. They just keep letting player after player walk out the door, and it's probably going to happen this year because T. Higgins is probably walking out the door. Now, on the case of T. Higgins, I actually can't justify that one. I don't think you should be paying T. Higgins the $30 million that some team probably is going to end up paying him. You have Jamar Chase. I think you can go a little bit cheaper somewhere else at receiver. Again, conflicting skill sets with him and Luther Burden. Don't think he'd go there. I think the Bengals are a prime day 2 wide receiver team. But that goes back to what will the Bengals do? And the Bengals just need to get themselves a defensive player and get themselves somebody who could do something. Now, when it comes to what I think they'll do, think you gotta go edge rusher. I don't even know how long Trey Hendrickson's gonna be on the team, since he was kind of asking for a trade, asking for a restructure. I don't think the rest of the edge group is all that good. You had Miles Murphy, who wasn't a great first-round pick. I think it comes down to, do you want to go with Shamar Stewart, or do you want to go with a player like Mykel Williams? I think that's kind of where they'd be looking. And between the two, I do think there's every chance that Stewart's going to be a big draft riser due to his athleticism. He has rare athleticism. Someone needs to mold him. I don't know if they're going to want to do that. And I think if the Bengals had their pick between the two, I think I'd probably go Mykel. I'm not sure 100%. I think you can really go either way here with how the board has fallen. So I'm going to go Mykel Williams. Seahawks. I think this one's pretty easy to say. Just need an offensive lineman. Please just get some offensive line help, man. Please just do something here to get some offensive line help. And you're looking, you got Membu, who Charles Cross is pretty good. Abraham Lucas, injury issues. You need interior offensive line, and looking at the guys you have available, I think Wyatt Milam, even though he is listed at tackle, I do think Wyatt Milam could be a really in-play pick here. They have him, 37th. I think Wyatt Milam's absolutely going in the first round, and I do think with how the board has gone, the Seahawks at this point would take Wyatt Milam. I still have to go in and, do a full scouting, so things are going to change. And again, this is not necessarily what I do. This is, a prediction here. And if I were the Seahawks, whichever way the thing falls, you got to go offensive line. You need interior offensive line help. You just need offensive line help in general. You got Charles Cross. You need help everywhere else, basically. So Wyatt Milam will be the pick here. And then you go to the Buccaneers at 19. Buccaneers, you need some edge rush help, and I think with the just straight up talent of Shamar Stewart available to them, this is a team that will just bet on raw talent. They took Elijah Cansey, who is a very unique player, and a guy who, outside of Todd Bowles' system, maybe wouldn't be as good, but Todd Bowles just knows how to get the most out of players and knows how to use athletes to the best of their abilities. They need an edge rusher and a true high upside edge rusher. So I think if they got the opportunity with Todd Bowles to work with Shamar Stewart, they would absolutely take that. And I think, Shamar Stewart's a player that I'm very iffy on because he needs to go to the right spot. But of all the places Shamar Stewart could go, I think the Buccaneers are probably one of his best landing spots because you get to work with Todd Bowles and you get to have a guy who actually knows how to handle defensive talent and knows how to handle and develop players. Broncos, you got Sean Payton here, and if there's one player Sean Payton's going to fall in love with, to me, pretty clear-cut Colston Loveland. I think this is a team that is all the way going to fall in love with Colston Loveland. You could also go receiver. I do think Burden would actually be a good pick for them. And if I were picking, I'd go Burden. For me, if I were picking for a number of these teams, I'd go Burden probably. But I think for what the Broncos are going to want, I think that, for a guy in Sean Payton who has had great tight ends and, most notably having Jimmy Graham, I think he's just going to want a true great tight end. And Colston Loveland, he could walk into the NFL and be like a top 10-ish tight end. And I don't think that opportunity is going to be something that Sean Payton would want to pass up. And I don't think if they pass on Loveland here, I don't think he'd last all that much longer. So I don't think they're going to have a shot at him elsewhere. Now you can make the argument, hey, go Burden here, take a tight end elsewhere. It's a pretty strong tight end class. And I do agree, which is why I would take Burden at 20 for the Broncos. But I think that the amount that Sean Payton might fall in love with Colston Loveland would be too strong. This is another situation where at the Steelers for 21, where it is strictly down to what I think versus what I would do. I think the Steelers need a wide receiver. Pickens is a good player. I don't think Pickens is like a true high level number one where you can give him 80, 90 catches on the season. He's a great complementary piece. He's a great outside receiver. He is a 1A type of receiver, but he's not a true number one. He's not a top 10 type of guy. You need somebody next to him who can be a guy who can funnel targets to. I don't know what it is. It just feels like Emeka Egbuka is such a Steeler. I don't know. Do you get that feel like that someone is just like, they're just going to go with them? It feels like Egbuka is such a Steeler. I don't even, Burden's obviously the better player to me, and the guy who they should take. But I don't know, do you ever get that feeling that someone just, like, the Steelers are such a predictable team. The Steelers just have a type. The Steelers have an archetype. The Steelers have a type of player, a type of person that they like to draft. And it just feels like Ibuka is the type of player that they would draft. So, I don't know, you can let me know. For me, Burden should obviously be the pick. But, like, Ibuka just feels like who they'd pick. I don't know why, I just have that feeling for them. We've hit the point where it's a crime that Luther Burden's on the board here. And, like I said, if trades were available, a team would have traded up by now. Like, Washington would be a team where, my dream for Washington is to get Luther Burden. I don't think being at 29, he'll make it there, but I mean, with the way I've gone with this draft, maybe Chargers. I think the Chargers are probably crying to themselves inside that Harbaugh has missed out on the opportunity to get Kenneth Brett or Colston Loveland. So you got to look to where else you can go, and got some options here. I don't think you are in love with a lot of the players on the board right now. Luther Burden, again, you could use a receiver, but Ladd McConkey is that type of player who can funnel like 90 catches to a season. I think they're pretty locked in there. Obviously, they don't need tackle. Could use edge rusher. But a player that I love a lot and I do think could help them a lot and have the versatility and, just be an absolute monster for them is Jahdae Barron. I love Jahdae Barron. He is going to be such a sought-after player in this draft, I feel like. And, for a team that has Derwin James and has the versatility there, I think Jahdae Barron gives them a lot of help at cornerback. And, they had actually some really good contributions at corner. They had Tarheeb Still. They had Cam Hart. So this is not to say that they are in dire need of a cornerback, but imagine how fun that secondary could be if you get the same contributions from Tarheeb Still, and you get that from Cam Hart, and you have, Derwin James playing at a high level. You have the versatility of Jahdae Barron, who can play inside, outside, who can play a multitude of roles for them. I do also think Nick Scorton would be in play for them, but I think Jahdae Barron's a player I'm more comfortable in saying is a better player right now, so I think they'd go Jahdae Barron. Packers at 23. This team needs to just quit this wide receiver by committee stuff. So I think this is where the slide ends. This team needs to stop this wide receiver by committee stuff. It's just not a move. Wide receiver by committee, you need a number one. Every team needs a go-to guy. The best receiver on that team is Jayden Reed, and I like Jayden Reed, but he's not a number one. He's a pretty nice number two. But I don't think a guy like Jayden Reed, for as much as I like him, is stopping you from taking a Luther Burden type of player. This team needs to stop acting like wide receivers shouldn't be in the first round. This team needs to stop it. And I feel like this happens every single year where you're like, oh yeah, the Packers, they're going to go and draft a receiver in the first round. And they never do. They never draft a receiver in the first round. And it's a pain every single time. Because even though they'll hit on a Christian Watson in the second round, who's been a nice player, or they'll get a Jayden Reed in the second round, who's a nice player. They'll get Dontavian Wicks, who was a nice find in day 3, and they'll get nice players, but you're not getting a Devontae Adams in round 2 all the time. You're not getting that type of player. Yeah, you lucked out and got Devontae Adams in the second round. You can get an AJ Brown, you can get a DK Metcalf. Those guys were second rounders, but you're not betting on that. If you want to go get a guy, go get a guy. Luther Burden is a guy, and he is a player that Jordan Love would absolutely die to have for, and put him inside, outside, give him screens, outs, throw him the football, let him work. You have Luther Burden, you have Jayden Reed, Christian Watson also with his injury. I don't know what his status is going to be for next season with the knee injury. I wouldn't be surprised if he just misses all of next year. Dontavian Wicks, again, another player who's not preventing you from taking a wide receiver. Just go and get a guy, because if you have Jordan Love, Luther Burden, and Josh Jacobs, and then the tight ends in Kraft and Musgrave are pretty nice, it's going to be a hard offense to stop. You thought the Packers offense were hard to stop because they have a lot of guys who can catch the football. Well, how about you get a receiver who you can actually design plays and be a go-to guy. We're 99% sure that Brian Flores is still going to be on the Vikings, which is great for them, unless by some miracle he ends up taking the Saints job, which is the only one available, which means this team is going to be looking for defense. They're going to be adding to that defense. I don't think running back is off the table here, because Maureen Hampton does kind of feel like he'd be a good pick for the Vikings. Depends on what you do with Aaron Jones. I think this team would be pretty comfortable taking a running back in day 2. And for me, I think a player that would absolutely be amazing for them is Siobhan Ravel. I mean, you both pair him with Byron Murphy, who had a Pro Bowl year this season. This team still does need cornerback help outside of Byron Murphy, and corner seems to be the area that I'd be looking. And you could go Trey Amos. I like Amos. He could be pretty nice for them, but I think Ravel is going to be the player you fall in love with. If Ravel didn't have a season-ending knee injury, he wouldn't be here at 24. Ravel would be a top 20 pick if he didn't have the injury, but to get him at 24, the knee injury was at a point in which he's gonna be good to go for the regular season. He shouldn't have too many lasting effects if all goes well, so I think they're gonna be pretty happy getting Siobhan Ravel at 24. 25 for the Texans. Offensive line. You need offensive line, and when you look at who's on the top of the board, Membu is pretty clear-cut the pick. Titus Howard just has not been a great tackle for them, and even Laramie Tunsil this year had a bit of a down year. Laramie Tunsil is supposed to be their guy, and even then, he's still a good player, but he didn't even have the strong type of year that he usually has. And tackle, you could go interior, you can go tackle, you can go really wherever, but you need to go offensive line. CJ Stroud should not be running for his life, so you go Membu here. Rams at 26. Now, this is a team that was able to build a outstanding defensive line. I mean, the defensive line for this team, imagine if they had Aaron Donald and to pair him with all the players that they have, and Kobe Turner and Jared Verse and all them. My goodness, it'd be an all-time level D-line, I feel like, because that team is scary to go up against in that front 4, front 5 level sets that they have. So, as funny as it would be to go and throw a Nick Scorton on there or Tyleek Williams to stop the run, I don't think that's going to happen, obviously. This team, there is rumors that Cooper Kupp could be on the way out, and this would be a really fun Luther Burden team. If you put Luther Burden on Sean McVay, so because you could say, oh, well, the Packers, they don't take receivers in the first round, so they're probably not going to do it again. If Burden's here at 26, I think that if Cooper Kupp's on his way out, no way. If Cooper Kupp is gone, you just have Puka, who true number 1 is Puka, but you pair him with a Luther Burden, that'd be too fun. You go elsewhere. Offensive line obviously could use it. I think this team is in a spot where they're in a weird phase because you don't know how much longer you have in guys like Cooper Kupp. You don't know how much longer you have in Matthew Stafford. Do you plan for the future? Do you plan for the now? There's probably conflicting opinions. Do you just say, this team isn't at a point in which they can compete for a Super Bowl right now, and just say, hey, we'll try to build things out for the future, build this for the long term? Or do you say, hey, strike while the iron's hot, you don't know when you're going to get another quarterback like Matthew Stafford, you don't know how long you're going to have Matthew Stafford for, or how many years he's going to be as good as Matthew Stafford is, so just try to send things now and do the most that you can, and try to make one more run to the Super Bowl. I think the Rams, I think they really could go either way. I think it does depend on what they do with the Cooper Kupp and some of the other players on the roster like that. I love Ben Morrison, and I am just so disappointed at the injury. For me, a hip injury, that is worse than blowing your knee out. I know I had Siobhan Ravel go at 24 and didn't really have any doubts about it, but I'm not going to say he just had a knee injury. A knee injury is still bad, but you can come back from a knee injury, and many players have done it. A hip injury is brutal, and a hip injury specifically for a cornerback is brutal. Ben Morrison's the type of guy who he could go first round or he could slide to day 3. There is such a range of outcomes on Ben Morrison. He's a first round level player when we've seen him play. Ben Morrison is top 20 type of player when he was healthy. But the injury has thrown a wrench into things, and I think a team will take a risk on Ben Morrison. I don't know if it'll be first round, but I will have it be the Rams. They do need corner help, and when you are trying to bet on who the best player at the quarterback position could be at this point, Ben Morrison does give you the opportunity to have a true number 1 corner. It's just, he also gives you the opportunity to have a player who will never be the same, and this is maybe a couple of years back when the Titans took a Caleb Farley, who had all the potential in the world, but just so many red flags with injuries, so many injury issues. And I like Caleb Farley as a player, but I'm man, he just can't stay healthy. And it didn't work out for a team like the Titans. Now, there are instances where it can work out. So I think the Rams could be betting on, hey, we think this can work out. We don't think the injury is going to be this career-altering like type of injury, so we're going to take Ben Morrison here to be our potential future number 1 corner. Ravens at 27. Now, I do think things have fallen pretty nicely for the Ravens because this is a team that I still think needs a bit of edge rush help. Kyle Van Noy's been awesome, but he's older. I don't know how much you're getting out of Kyle Van Noy at this point going forward the next year or two. And when you're looking at some of the edge rushers that they have taken, Dafe Owe, and they had David Ajabo as a risky pick. I think, going for these great athlete type of players would be what they want to go for. But David Ajabo had, some injury red flags, which is why he fell. And Dafe Owe has been a pretty nice player, but he's not a true number 1. I think for a team looking for an edge rusher, the fact that Nick Scorton is still here would be somewhere that they would be willing to go. Now, I would not be shocked at all if Scorton is like a top 20 pick. I do think Scorton is a really good player. I think a lot of the love has been, given to a Shamar Stewart because of his raw athleticism. But hey, Nick Scorton's a good athlete too. I don't want that to be, lost on people. Nick Scorton's a pretty good athlete too. And I think he is maybe a bit more safer of a pick than a Shamar Stewart. Shamar Stewart maybe has the higher ceiling, but I think Nick Scorton can still be a really good player for the Ravens. Lions, this just feels like a really obvious pick to me. I feel like this is another one of those common mock picks is Jack Sawyer. Like, it just feels like Jack Sawyer is a Lion. I went back to saying, like, oh, it feels like Abuka's a Steeler, or it feels like Colston Loveland is a Bronco, or Tyler Warren's a Colt. There are some players where it's just, it feels like they're going to go there. It feels like Jack Sawyer is a Lion. Aiden Hutchinson will be back next season. He'll be good to go. But you had some Band-Aid acquisitions there, but you needed a true number 2 opposite of him. Now, I'm not as big on Jack Sawyer as some others. I do think there's some other areas where they could go and some other players he could go where I'd be a little bit more excited, but Jack Sawyer, not an exciting pick, but a player who I think just feels like he'll be a Lion. Washington at 29, so I get to pick for my favorite team, and there's a lot of players that they could be targeting here because Washington is a team that definitely overachieved and has a lot of holes still. I do think that they are a team, I get to speak a little bit more as like a fan, have more knowledge of what this team, the ins and outs of them. I need Andrew Wiley to go. I think they need a tackle badly. I don't think they'd spend that a first rounder on that. I do think this team could use a true great running back. Don't think they'd go first rounder on that, though. Getting an Amari and Hampton wouldn't be bad. I do think this team, I don't know what they're going to do at interior D-line because you could make the argument Jonathan Allen, Deron Payne could be on their way out with their expensive contracts, but even still, Jason Newton I really like a lot. I loved the pick last year, so I'd be willing to invest in him. Edge rusher, you could go there. I don't know how much you're really relying on a Dante Fowler or other guys like that to really be key contributors. I know there's a lot of negativity on Marshawn Lattimore. I will at least give him the benefit of the doubt and say, he was coming off a hamstring injury, a midseason acquisition. He wasn't really ever 100% healthy. So I do think Marshawn Lattimore deserves a little bit of grace here, and to give him a full year. Corner still wouldn't be the worst option, even though Sanders still is awesome. But for this team, they need a number 2 receiver. They need another receiver so bad. There's a lot of people who want Washington and think Washington is just going to sell out and go for T. Higgins. I'll be honest, as a Washington fan, I don't want to sign T. Higgins. And it's not because T. Higgins is not a great player. T. Higgins is a top 20 receiver pretty comfortably. T. Higgins is an amazing player. But for me, my strategy and my philosophy when it comes to building out a team, do not pay 2 wide receivers. I don't think that's effective. I don't think that's effective. I don't think that's the way to go. I don't think you should pay 2 wide receivers. Especially, don't pay them $50 million should not be allocated to 2 wide receivers to build a roster. I think you pay 1 receiver. You paid Terry. Terry's a great receiver. And Terry's also better than T. Higgins. Terry is a true number 1. You don't need to bring in T. Higgins at $30 million to be a number 2. Because $30 million, you may be saying that's a little crazy. T. Higgins is going to get $30 million. The Patriots may give him that. The Patriots would probably give him $30 million. The Panthers would give him close to that. There are a number of teams that would do that. So I don't have the expectation that Washington's going to go out there and pay T. Higgins $30 million because they shouldn't. Even though they have the money, just because you have the money doesn't mean you should go and pay T. Higgins $30 million. Now, I will say as a fan, if they get T. Higgins, I ain't gonna act like I'm not gonna be excited to have Terry and T. Higgins as a duo, but I will sit there and say, if you paid him 28, 29, 30 million, that's a little too much. For me, I said the dream is to have, Luther Burden fall to us, or maybe make a trade up for Luther Burden, which I do think is possible. Even a guy like Luther Burden, if you go and look at his social medias, this dude wants to be in Washington so bad. He is under Jaden Daniels' post 24/7. He is looking at, jersey swaps and, photoshops of him in Washington jerseys. I ain't never seen a player want to be in Washington so badly, so that's also another reason why I do want him. But he's off the board here. I love Alec Io Manor. I am such a big Io Manor fan. I don't think Io Manor is the archetype of player that Washington would take here. I think they'd want a player like a Burden, a player like that who you can give a lot more targets to, a lot more screens to. This team throws a lot of screens, and I can't tell you how many times I had to sit there and watch De'Ami Brown or Olamide Zaccheaus get screen passes and do nothing with them. This team wants a catch-and-run screen threat. This team wants a player that you can put the ball in his hands and he can go and make something happen. That's why I want Burden. He's not here? Well, who's the next best available player to do that role? And a player that has crazy upside as well. To me, that's Savion Williams. I know this one's a bit more of a reach. I think of all the players you could have to fill that role that Washington wants, I think Savion Williams is the one who fits it the best. Now, when it comes to who the receivers I have on the board, where they're ranked, I do think Io Manor and Jaden Higgins are two players that I rank ahead of Savion Williams. Like, if I'm dropping a wide receiver board, and I eventually do want to drop a big board and everything, but it's not because Savion Williams, I think, is the best wide receiver here, but I think it provides Washington with what they want. I think Higgins and Io Manor are straight up better players and can be better players, but I think for someone who's going to be screen threat, pop passes, bubbles, jets, I think that's going to be a role that Cliff Kingsbury has always had, and even in Washington this year that we have seen be filled by players who probably shouldn't be filling that role. I think Washington, if Burden was an option, they would want him, but I think if the next choice that they would have, I think they'd go Savion Williams, and he's probably a guy who should go in the second round, but I don't think he would make it to the 29th pick in the second round, so it'd be a situation where either they're taking something else here at 29 and trading up in the second, or they're just going to take him here, or maybe trade out of the first, get him early second, but, no trade. So I think Washington, if they had their choice of these receivers, would go Savion Williams. It puts us to the Bills at 30. Now, the Bills are a team, everyone kind of has the idea that they're going to go with a defensive lineman of some kind. You got Von Miller aging, not really doing much, overpaid type of player, and they could use help elsewhere. I think this is a Bills team also. They love rotating. They love having a bunch of guys in the middle. I think you can say Tyreek Williams would be an option, but for me, I can't go through a mock draft here and not have Walter Nolan go in the first round. Walter Nolan is incredible, and I can see a number of other teams drafting Walter Nolan. I can see him going in the 20s. I can see him going, in this area here. I don't think it'd be a surprise, but Walter Nolan is one of the players who should be going in the first round. And for a team that needs defensive line, I don't know how you would sit here picking a defensive lineman with these guys on the board and not want to take Walter Nolan. So I think that would be the pick for the Bills. The Eagles now, they're a team, what do the Eagles even need? They don't have many needs, but I do think one will pop up, and that is on the defensive line. It is a team that is not going to be able to pay everybody, because when you have this much talent, paying players becomes a tricky task, because now Zach Bond is going to be commanding a big contract, and you're probably gonna want to keep Zach Bond after a finalist for Defensive Player of the Year and All-Pro season. And then you got other players. I don't think you're going to be bringing back Mekhi Becton. I don't think you're going to want to pay him. I don't think you're going to want to pay Milton Williams, even though Milton Williams is awesome especially as a number 3. I think some team is going to pay him to be their out-and-out starter. Josh Sweat, I don't know if you're going to be able to keep him around, especially with Nolan Smith emerging on a cheaper deal. I don't know where you are going to fit all the money that you have to allocate to all of these players. So I think if any spot in the Eagles roster is going to open up for a need in this draft, I think it would be defensive line, and I think maybe more notably edge, because, well, you could go Tyreek Williams in the defensive line. You already have Jordan Davis as your big big body run stopper. I don't think you need a Tyreek Williams. So you could go with some other players, but I think edge would be where they go. And the guy I kind of would look at for them would be Princely, as, like I said, someone's gonna go, whether it is Milton Williams or Josh Sweater, maybe even Zach Bond. I feel like they'd prioritize Bond to keep, though, as he was the best of the 3 players this season. So I think if they're going to go somewhere, they're going to load up more on edge and get Princely to round out the draft. Now we have the 32nd pick in the draft, and there's going to be a couple players, unfortunately, that are going to slide out of the first round. It always happens. Players, not everyone that should go in the first round or can go in the first round will. For me, it's going to be disappointing to see, a player like Io Manor and Jaden Higgins not go in the first round, even though I absolutely think for a team that needs a wide receiver, you wouldn't be crazy to take them in the first round. For the Chiefs here, they need tackle. Of course they need tackle. They have the best 3-man interior offensive line in the league, but an atrocious situation at tackle. I just don't know if you're looking at the board right now and saying that, you want to invest a first-round pick on one of these guys. I think the Chiefs could be a prime, free agency trade type of team for a tackle. I don't know if they'd want to draft another player. They already drafted Kingsley Suamataia in the draft last year, and I know different, not a first round pick, but you already drafted a player to develop last season. You're hoping he can make a step up this upcoming year, and you probably would want a veteran elsewhere. So I think this is actually a situation where you could take a weapon. Maybe you go wide receiver, but Xavier Worthy was already a hit last year. You don't need to go double down on first round receivers, especially since, maybe DeAndre Hopkins could be sticking around for a long time. I don't think you need to double down on wide receivers, especially because, with Xavier Worthy being a hit, you got DeAndre Hopkins in a trade. I don't know if he's going to be sticking around for another season or not, but running back is where I look for the Chiefs. And, with the Chiefs, yeah, Pacheco's been hurt this year, but I don't think Pacheco's a great running back, and he's okay. He's a guy who you're pretty comfortable with, like, splitting carries, but he's not a guy who should be your out-and-out starter. And right now he is splitting carries, but he's splitting carries with Kareem Hunt, who is just incredibly washed right now. These running backs are just made to look better than what they really are because they've had the benefit of running behind this great interior offensive line. But you get a great running back, you get a good running back in there, then I think this team could look a lot different on offense with the running game. Now, with the running backs, there's a lot of guys available. And for me, I'm not going to take the best guy available, because to me, you could go Amarian Hampton, Caleb Johnson. Those are probably the 2 best backs available. But for the Chiefs, I think they would be a Quishon Judkins type of team. I think they would really like Judkins. He's a very safe, he's a very reliable, he's a very, championship type team player. He's a player, not just because Ohio State won the title, but he's a very safe player. Amarian Hampton, there's a little bit more upside there, and there's a little bit more excitement there, but the Chiefs don't need super high upside. The Chiefs just need a guy who has great vision, great patience, great ability to utilize the stuff that he has at his disposal, like that great offensive line. And I think Judkins would be the type of player of any of the running backs available would be able to maximize Trey Smith, Creed Humphrey, and Joe Thuney in the interior. So I think Judkins for the Chiefs actually does make a good bit of sense. So I think I'd have them go with Judkins. So that wraps up the draft. So here's the mock draft that I have put together, and you can see 1 through 32. You can let me know what you think. Obviously mock draft, always a good time for discussion, always a good time to, have some good debates and to see where your favorite team is going to be picking. Did I do your favorite team dirty? I mean, again, this was also a mix of what I think will happen as well. This draft didn't go the way in which I would personally do it, but, a mock draft, it's a mix between what you think and what you want, what you think what they should do. So you can let me know what you think your favorite team should do and what you think was maybe a good pick, who's going to go higher, who's going to go lower. Like, comment, and subscribe. Also, let me know what you thought of the face cam and everything. I do plan on doing more stuff like that, so I hope you guys all enjoyed. Like I said, like, comment, and subscribe, and I will see you guys all in the next one.